Namaskar. Welcome to Gnani's World. Dear viewers of Gnani's World, in this video let us look at the Bible and the Indian Constitution according to Brother G. Bibu. Before we continue, do subscribe to our channel and press bell icon for updates.
Let us look at the Bible's great claim. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it.
Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.
For what nation is there so great, who hath God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for?
And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5 to 8.
Several things stand out plainly in the above text quoted from the Holy Bible.
The Bible is not only a spiritual book dealing with things above, it has statutes and judgments revealed upon its pages, which enables its adherents to live a meaningful life of wisdom and understanding here on earth.
The laws and statutes taught in it are unique and superior to the laws governing any other nation of the world. This must be so if the Bible is the sole written revelation from the one and only God.
The wisdom and understanding acquired by virtue of these statutes and judgments is obvious to anyone who considers them carefully.
As rightly pointed out by some of the old commentators upon the above text.
Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Almost all the nations in the earth showed that they had formed this opinion of the Jews by borrowing from them the principal part of their civil code. Take away what Asia and Europe, whether ancient or modern, have borrowed from the Mosaic laws, and you leave little behind that can be called excellent, says Adam Clarke.
Now there was not any nation then in being, nor any sins to be compared with the nation of the Jews, for the wise and wholesome laws given unto them. No, not the more cultivated and civilized nation as the Grecians and Romans, who had the advantage of such wise lawgivers as they were accounted, as Solon, Lycurgus, Newman, and others. And indeed, the best laws that they had seemed to be borrowed from the Jews, says Dr. John Gill.
If the Bible is the word of God, then the legal system it provides must be unique and incomparably superior to what mere human minds could devise. Every other nation must be able to objectively discern this uniqueness. This paper seeks to examine this great claim made by the Bible and find out whether we as Indians can verify this claim in the context of the Indian jurisprudence.
Dear viewers of Gnani's World, now let us see how the Bible's great claim proved in the Indian context. The Indian legal system is a blessing bestowed upon this nation by the Holy Bible. This may sound like an exaggeration or a claim from an extreme bigot, but the call is to take this claim only as a hypothesis and examine the truth of it with a candid mind. The primary purpose of this page is to demonstrate this claim within the limited scope of the Indian Constitution, proving that there is no God to whom this country owes as much as incalculable depths of this legal system as its indebtedness to the God of the Bible. Besides establishing the clear and unmistakable nexus between the biblical precepts and the legal principles, there will be a careful attempt to also negate the possibilities of any contributions from any alternate religious resources in shaping the civil life of this country. It is arguable that the religions which are so mutually exclusive could not have been the collective sources or contributories to a legal system that reflects the ideals of just one of them to the derogation of the others.
When India became independent, we chose to continue using several statutory enactments made by the British during their regime. The Indian Penal Code 1860, the Indian Contracts Act 1872, the Indian Evidence Act 1872, the Civil Procedure Code 1908, etc. are some of the prominent examples of such statutes. But more importantly, any standard textbook dealing with the sources of our Constitution will inform us that we choose to borrow the basic principles of our constitution from the West. For instance, we borrowed the rule of law from Britain, fundamental rights from the United States, the ideals of republic, liberty, equality and fraternity in the preamble from France. The list goes on and is too big to be incorporated here. It is a known fact that the Reformation movement in the West, which was completely based on the Bible, became the chief contributor to the legal system in the Western civilized nations, since the Protestant Reformation began to influence the socio-economic and political lives of its followers. Since India chose to be a beneficiary to this biblical legacy by borrowing from the West, the principles underlying its legal system is bound to reflect the standards taught in the Bible, more than that of any indigenous religious literature. Any unbiased mind will freely admit that the Bible governs the Indian jurisprudence more than the Vedas, or the Manusmriti, or any other book of note. This serves as one of the several instances to prove the biblical claim that there is no nation which has laws comparable to its own laws, which argues for the divine revelation of the Bible. The great contribution of the Bible in the making of Indian legal system can be adequately demonstrated from any branch of the law. But we will now confine our attention only to certain fundamental features of our constitution which serves to substantiate this great claim.
Sovereign Constitution. The preamble of the Indian Constitution lays down that our constitution is sovereign. This forms the basis of what is called the rule of law. Rule of law implies that the nation is to be governed not by the arbitrary authorities of a man or a group of people but by the established law. Though there will be a government in place, it has to act within the bounds determined by the constitution. No arbitrary power is to be usurped by any government in a way as to transgress the constitutional bounds. In other words, the king and the subjects are alike answerable to a system of laws to which they are equally under subjection. The government runs the constitutional mechanism, but is not itself the constitution. Hence, the actual sovereign is the constitution and the government is only its servant.
Now, here is what the Bible says about constitutional sovereignty or the rule of law. And it shall be, when he, the king, sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priest the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of his law and the statutes to do them. That his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 18 to 20.
Thus, the king is the subjection to the law as much as anyone else as per the Bible. He is only to implement and abide by what the law has already determined, and must not act arbitrarily or set him above his subjects, whom the Bible calls him brethren.
But contrast this with the Manusmriti, which is supposed to be a primary source of ancient Indian jurisprudence.
Manusmriti 193. As the Brahmana sprang from Brahman's mouth, as he was the firstborn, and as he possesses the Veda, he is by right the Lord of this whole creation.
Manusmriti 1:107-108. In this work, the sacred law has been fully stated, as well as the good and bad qualities of human actions and the immemorial rule of conduct, to be followed by all the four castes, Varna. The rule of conduct is transcendent law, whether it be taught in the revealed text or in the sacred tradition. Hence, a twice-born man who possesses regard for himself should be always careful to follow it.
The second citation above may seem to suggest that the Manusmriti also commands adherence to its own rules. Why is this not constitutional supremacy or the rule of law? Because the first citation makes it plain that the Brahmana is by right the Lord of the creation. It is evident from the pursuit of the rest of Manusmriti that it is a mechanism to bring all other castes under the Brahmanic subjection. So, the Brahmanic accountability to the Manu-made constitution is reduced to ensure Brahmanic reign over the rest of the society. This is so unlike the biblical rule of law, where the throne sitter is to be no better than his fellow subjects who are his brethren, and who is accountable before the law as much as any other subject thereof. Hence, the Indian Constitution finds the appropriate parallel to its principle of the rule of the laws in the Bible, wherein the indigenous religious books of India, we find the rule of the caste disguising itself as the rule of law.
Socialist Constitution. The preamble further lays down that our constitution is socialist in nature. This implies the equality of all citizens to the total eradication of all forms of arbitrary discrimination. Articles 14 to 18 of the Indian Constitution protects the right of all citizens to be treated equal before the law and entitles them all to the equal protection of laws. Going by the religious texts in India, the very idea of equality is foreign to this country. Could the Indian religious texts upholding the Varna-based inequalities contribute to the principle of equality? More than the Bible, which teaches that man has created in the image and likeness of God. This is certainly no riddle to grapple with. Just make note of and contrast the biblical and the Hindu worldviews on how man was brought into existence, which is a sufficient instance to demonstrate as to which of the two actually affords prospects of an egalitarian society.
Regarding the creation of man, the Bible says, "And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 and 27.
Now, we will contrast this with the Vishnu Purana Book 1, which declaration is also upheld by Rig Veda Book 10, 90, 12, the Bhagavad Gita 4, 13, etc.
Formerly, O best of Brahmins, when the true meditating Brahma was desirous of creating the world, they sprang from his mouth, being especially endowed with the quality of goodness. Others from his breast, pervaded by the quality of foulness. Others from his thighs, in whom foulness and darkness prevailed. And others from his feet, in whom quality of darkness predominated. These were in succession, being of the several castes: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, produced from the mouth, the breast, the thighs, and the feet of Brahma.
The Hindu religious books not only showed discrimination between man and man based on its unfounded supposition of the origin of man, but also paved a way for discrimination against women to disrespect and exploit them along the same unfounded grounds. As seen from the biblical citation above, not only man but even the woman was created in the image and likeness of God. But how were women created according to the Hindu religious texts?
The Bhagavad Gita 9:32. For, O son of Prita, even those who are of sinful birth women, Vaishyas and Shudras likewise resorting to me, attain the supreme goal. What then need to be said of holy Brahmanas and royal saints who are my devotees? Coming to this transient unhappy world, worship me, place your mind on me, become my devotee, my worshipper, reverence me, and thus make me your highest goal. And devoting yourself to abstraction, you will certainly come to me.
Note that women are included among those of sinful birth, unlike the Brahmins and the royal saints who are of a so-called noble birth. Manusmriti 9:16-18. Knowing the disposition which the Lord of creatures laid in them at the creation to be such, every man should most strenuously exert himself to guard them. When creating them, Manu allotted to women a love of their bed, of their seat and of ornament, impure desires, wrath, dishonesty, malice and bad conduct. For women no sacramental rite is performed with sacred texts. Thus, the law is settled. Women who are destitute of strength and destitute of the knowledge of Vedic texts are as impure as falsehood itself. That is a fixed rule.
When such is the indignity cast upon men of lower castes and the women of all castes in the Vedic literature, how is it that the Indian Constitution came to recognize the equality of all men and women and vows to protect it? How is it aligns more with the Bible than with Manu or the Gita? The answer is not far to seek. When the Bible-based equality influenced our constitution, the caste-based atrocity came to be recognized as social evils, fit only to be prohibited and penalized by the law of this land. Why then may the Hindutva fringe not hate the Bible, which vanquished the basic structure of their Sanatana barbarianism, which would have otherwise rendered the rest of India their footstool?
Secular Constitution. Not only does the preamble of the Indian Constitution provide for a secular constitution, but Articles 25 to 28 of the Constitution protects the religious freedom of all citizens to process, practice, and propagate any religion of one's choice. At the outset, this may seem to conflict with the Bible, which commands adherence to itself and to no other faith system. But when we understand that our Constitution also lays down certain reasonable restrictions to the religious freedom granted, the apparent conflict between the Bible and our Constitution disappears at once.
The freedom allowed in Article 25 of the Indian Constitution is subject to three reasonable restrictions, namely public order, morality, and health. The practice of any religion which violates any of these three restrictions is unconstitutional and must be prohibited. The Bible also prohibits adherence to any alternate faith system on the presupposition that the best moral framework shaped under its unique and supreme laws and statutes can be challenged by other faith systems which follow a substandard ethics. Leviticus 18 chapter 1 to 5 and 24 to 30, Deuteronomy 12 30 to 32.
This can even be verified within the Indian context today. Every deity that is presented in the Indian religious books stand condemned by the Indian Penal Code. If taken seriously, they all set a bad moral precedence for humans to follow. Their teachings violate many of the fundamental rights recognized and enforced under the Indian Constitution. We have good Hindus today because they do not adhere properly to their religious teachings on all things. They are unable to follow many of the precepts of their religious texts, as our Constitution and our law has done an excellent job in prohibiting and penalizing what many Hindu texts prescribe. Atrocities on lower castes, practices derogatory to the honor of women, polygamy, offences against children, ideas threatening the life and liberty of fellow human beings are just some of the many examples of such prohibitions. Whatever is morally sound and healthy is either absent in the Indian religious books or is harmfully intermingled with hazardous teachings and dangerous precedents. Whatever can be found in these books conforming to moral values actually predates them and has their origin in the Holy Bible. Hence, the religious freedom guaranteed in Article 25 of our Constitution, if enforced in its true spirit, would actually enforce the biblical values alone, which may or may not have parallels in other religious teachings. The difference between the biblical instance for exclusivity and the limited religious freedom in Article 25 of our Constitution is not one of the principle but rather of practice. In principle, they are one and the same.
Democratic Republic. When thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shalt possess it, and shalt dwell therein, and shalt say, I'll set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose, one from among thy brethren. Shalt thou set king over thee? Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. Deuteronomy chapter 17, 14 and 15 verses.
This citation from the Bible plainly vests the power of choosing a ruler in the hands of the people. Though in practice, Israel failed to exercise it to the full, the principle is plainly recognized in the Bible. Moreover, this text suggests that the one chosen by the people to be their ruler must be chosen one of God, implying that he must be an Israelite and not a stranger. This is in principle the true meaning of a republic, where the representative of a people must be chosen from among them.
The preamble of the Indian Constitution clearly defines India as a democratic republic. This, however, could not have found place in our constitution if it were influenced by any indigenous religious sources. As we are well aware, all the Indian religious writings unanimously make the caste hierarchy the basis for determining the rulers and the ruled.
Manusmriti 8, 2021. A Brahmana who subsists only by the name of his caste, Gati, or one who merely calls himself a Brahmana, though his origin be uncertain, may at the king's pleasure interpret the law to him, but never a Shudra. The kingdom of that monarch who looks on while a Shudra settles the law will sink low, like a cow in a morass.
Manusmriti 461. Let him not dwell in a country where the rulers are Shudras, nor in one which is surrounded by unrighteous men, nor in one which has become subject to heretics, nor in one swarming with men of the lowest caste.
These passages, which reflect the general tenor of the Vedic literature, prove that the Indian religious texts are the high threats to a democratic republic framework.
Conclusion. The Constitution of India, properly speaking, is a document foreign to India. Had the indigenous religious sources framed our constitution, we would not have spoken of the rule of law, but the rule of a caste. Equality would still have been a heresy punishable with banishments, lashes and death. Religious bigotry would have flushed aside secularism. Democratic republic would have been a concept of the Mlachas.
When the fringe elements of Hindutva speak of a Hindu state, when they speak of constitutional reforms, do not be carried away into thinking that they have a better constitution to offer. They hate this constitution which ruined the basic structure of Hinduism. The only way to regain what they lost is by Manuizing it on the pretext of reforms. They will continue to hate the Bible and its propagators because they only can feel the immense damage caused by it to their inhuman and barbaric system, which they may choose to call Sanatan.
Dear viewers of Jnani's World, may this video serve as an impetus for a much deeper research to bring out the Bible hidden within our exemplary legal system. For the glory of Him who revealed such unique and supreme laws which were otherwise unknown to the nations of the world.
Kindly subscribe to the channel and press bell icon for further updates. Also follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you.